guys, welcome along to my second edition of my brilliant chatter. And today, really delighted and excited to have CK. CK, how are you doing?
Hello, mate. Great to be here.
You all right?
I'm really well. I'm really well.
Good. Good. Thank you. Same. This is my second edition, if you like, second episode, and I'll be honest, and I'll say, before I even started doing this, you kind of look at people who you'd like to have on like my little podcast video thing, as I call it, and my brilliant chatter, and you kind of set yourself up and think, I'd like to have this person, I'd like to have that person. I think it's no secret that, these things develop well when you've got you're doing chats with people that you've got like things in common with and you can get on with, and typically you could just go for a beer with somebody in a pub and have a chat for hours and hours, and like you definitely fit that. And I've always been, it's no secret, I've been admiring your stuff for such a long time, and it's just such a shame we can't do this in a, like I say, in a pub, and we're having to do this via Zoom because I think it'd be so much better kind of face to face. But
our relationship's been a weird one. It just came out of nowhere. Now we have mandates and stuff.
Mandates, like a real bromance kind of going off. So we
have mandates in the most romantic places, mainly as this coffee shop.
Yeah, no, for sure. Listen, joking apart, delighted to have you on. And obviously, in terms of like today, some of the things that we're going to be kind of chatting about is I know in terms of like people will know, well, I'll ask you the question in a bit, what people know you as. But for me, you've kind of got two sides to you. I see you as this kind of like independent filmmaker, if you like. There's been like the some of the fantastic stuff I've watched, which is like the 100 Musicians, the 61 Hugs, and my favorite, which is like The Bench. And again, that's no secret. But I kind of guess like in the business world, the bit that kind of, and there's that split between, and I guess everybody's like this, where you've got the stuff that kind of makes you money and you've got the stuff that's just really nice things to be able to do. But in terms of like the day job, I guess the commercial side, people will kind of know you as that kind of PR person that's got a passion for kind of helping artists or businesses get their product or skill noticed, and today I want to talk to you about the film stuff, and I absolutely want to talk to you about hints and tips and tricks of how you've helped and supported these individuals and artists and businesses get their products on TV and in national newspapers, which is amazing. So, but leading you in now, I mean, do you want to like give us a bit of background, really? Tell us a bit about CK, because I think you're a fascinating guy, and like I say, my time with you is always like really pleasurable. So over to you.
Thanks. Well, I'm going to steal a technique that your guest one had, my bestie, Johnny. So you had John Colby on last week. Yeah. Congratulations, mate. That was a great opening episode. I loved it. Genuinely did. Great. And I'm going to go back to my school years. But the thing is, right, Dave, at school, there were three things that I was relatively average at, right? I absolutely was not the most sporty kid at school, right? When it came to picking football teams, I was never the first. I was usually like in the last-ish picks.
I'm getting a picture of Kez come into my mind. The film on Kez where he's picking the team, and yeah, all right.
I was kind of mid to end in terms of who got picked.
Yeah.
So I wasn't a sportsman. In terms of academia, I wasn't the most intelligent. I'd say I was above average in terms of kind of intelligence. I had to really work to get the A's that I got in GCSE and all that jazz. And when it came to the boys that the girls are talking about and giggling about fancying, I was never part of that conversation. I was never part of that conversation. However,
that's all changed now, right?
Correct. No. There was one area where I did have a very, very focused niche that I excelled at, and that was my imagination, right? My imagination and my ability to craft a story, an interesting, memorable, amusing, inspiring, uplifting story. It's always been there, and it's always been my default. Like, I live in my head for 93% of my life, and I find it very comforting in my head. And so storytelling and narrative and imagination was always where I excelled. So fast forward like 15 years into my late 20s, I got into radio, started presenting online TV, music festivals, and I just enjoyed the art of crafting stories and engaging with people. And then I started making short, spontaneous videos, which is my interaction with people. And I didn't actually know that the bench was your favorite thing of mine, Dave.
Yes.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. But fast forward further steps, then what happened is I started creating these big ornate challenges, which would sometimes require me to spend 6 months in London with just £100, for example. That was my first viral project, 100 musicians, which you referenced.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk to you about that in a bit, actually. Yeah, it's really exciting, that one. But yeah.
I'd love to. So I just started creating these big, elaborate, ornate, memorable challenges, which pushed me, and kind of people really found them inspiring, uplifting, fun, engaging, captivating. And through doing those projects, I started to realize that there's a certain pattern into what engages people's imagination and what actually excites people and gets them hooked. And then once I started actually thinking, oh, these projects are really interesting, I wonder if I can get this featured in that website or that newspaper or that TV or whatever. So then I just started touting out my stuff to radio, to TV, to magazines, to newspapers. Then I started noticing that they were getting featured in some key prominent platforms like Red Bull or Metro or Huffington Post. And then I started thinking, like, why are these people talking about a guy that's like relatively unknown? Then I just started figuring out how to cultivate a story around my projects to get them featured. Then I just started realizing, oh, there is a pattern to getting your art, your business, your brand, your products, your service, or you as an entrepreneur. There is a pattern to getting these things featured. Then I started applying it to brands and entrepreneurs, businesses, services, and then the same results were happening. So I was getting
if my memory serves me correctly, and I genuinely don't want to make this story up, and I can't remember the brand, but did you not apply that? Was it Vans or Kickers or Converse or something? What was the trainer brand where you reached out to the? Was it the owner of a train? Was it a shoe company or trainers? What was that?
That was fun. That was K-Swiss.
K-Swiss, that's it. I thought it was Vans. You're going to show me a pair of K-Swiss now, aren't you?
No, I've got like 4 boxes over there. I love it. I just love them. I love them.
Yeah.
It was K-Swiss, and long story short, I can't even remember. That was 2017. That was a project where I stood in Soho, a busy street in London, and I was curious to see, because I'm from the north, and I've always been aware of this perceived north-south divide. Like the north is perceived to be friendlier than the south, but I necessarily don't agree. Yeah. But I went down to London and I was curious to see what would happen if I stood in Soho and asked random passerbys if I could take them to lunch on me. I was curious to see how Londoners would respond. And the reason I did that is because K-Swiss, maybe a month before that, I'm always talking about how much I love them.
It was like a pay it forward, weren't it? Yeah.
They sent me a free pair of trainers. I'm always banging about how much I love them. And I'm the kind of guy that if I receive something nice, I like to put it back into the universe. So I said, if you really are going to send me a free pair of trainers, I'm going to stand in the street and I'm going to offer to buy strangers lunch. And that's exactly what happened. So there's an interesting story about getting that project featured in. That was featured on the Evening Standard website, which is a huge website. And I learned so much about getting it featured on there as well, which we'll certainly get into. But one thing I've learned about pitching my clients' product, services, stories is that you are always going to get more no's than yeses. But if you persevere, you'll always land a big whale. I've learned that through my own stuff and through my clients' stuff. So.
No, I think the other thing as well is like, and again, I think an interesting point about you, and I've tried to kind of adopt that process today, and I'm not having anything kind of too structured for the chat with you, is one of your skills is just going with it. There's no like preset like script, is there? It's kind of, nothing really to practice. One of the skills that you've got is just going with it. And, I find that just incredible. I'm genuinely not like that. And I prefer to have a little bit of structure where you've got that skill of just kind of just going with it. And I think that's interesting.
Well, thank you, mate. And that's really well observed. And it's actually a skill that I was completely oblivious to. I was blind to that. And it is something that is certainly an ability of mine. And it permeates in everything I do. I remember when I started presenting music festivals, I remember I never used to like going on stage with too much prep or a script, because I know that the best CK, I know the version of me that people connect to most is the one that's on the fly.
Yeah.
They can kind of get a certain energy from me that way. So if ever I'm reading from a script, I've got stuff prepped, I feel it stifles that energy that I enjoy, and I generally find that the audience enjoys as well. So bravo, Dave.
No, it's good. I think the other thing is, we kind of touched on it in terms of in my opening, where the commercial side of you looks at how you can get brands noticed, how you can get people noticed, and that kind of, I guess, brings me on to one of the film's documentaries sessions that you did, which was the 100 musicians. And if you took that in its kind of loosest form, what you've got there is, artists where you were trying to get them known, you were trying to and all that. But what, from your perspective, I mean, this story, like, as I see it, is just fascinating. So pretty much, you left Sheffield with 100 quid in your back pocket, and your aim was to, well, from my perspective, looking at the film, your aim was to spend as long as you could down there, surviving on the £100 that you went down with, and the donations, fees, payment for creative services, photography, whatever it was. How long could you stick it out there? Like, that for me is mental. Like, I wouldn't even go to Athersage without being able to know where I was going or what I was doing. So tell us a little bit about that, because I've seen lots of interviews about that particular program, and I think everybody takes something different from it. But from your perspective, what was going through your mind? What even was it,
A slight aside, Dave, it's interesting that you say you would even go now to Hathersage, because I'm currently writing my book, and I referenced the day I decided I was going to go down and do that challenge. That was 5 years ago, in 2015. Ironically, I don't know that I'm that brave anymore. So
right. Yeah, no. So what was it all about then, man? So you just like.
So because I'm a professional photographer as well, like art and my imagination are my default. So I got very good at photography very quickly. And at the time, it was in 2015, I was just a little bit bored. I felt a little bit claustrophobic in Sheffield, and I wanted a big adventure. And I wanted to create my own hero story. And hero story plays a part in everything I do. We'll talk about that later. Remind me to talk about hero stories.
Hero stories, yeah.
I'm going to go down to London, and I'm going to take my camera, a bag of clothes, £100 and nothing else. And my challenge was to find 100 unsigned independent singer-songwriters and bands, and equip them with stunning, striking, professional photography to promote their art and their music. Wow. So the hook was, they paid me whatever they wanted for the photo shoot. There was no minimum or maximum ticket price. And my challenge was to get from 0 musicians to having photographed 100 before my seed money and the voluntary contributions ran out. So it wasn't necessarily how long can I stay down here. It's more a case of I need to photograph 100 musicians as quickly as I can before my money runs out. So I was thinking this will probably take me like a month max, probably a couple of weeks. Like, in my head, who doesn't want a photo shoot that's free, right?
Yeah.
But I kind of underestimate the fact that A, nobody knows who CK Goldiing is. I knew no one in London. I had no traction behind me. So getting momentum was impossible. So it took me 6 months from start to finish.
Wow.
It was mad.
So where did you end up on, like, your first day then? So just briefly, where did you go to first, and why?
It's a really good question, and I think because my memory's been shredded due to social media and all the inputs we have nowadays, my memory's shredded. But I think I booked a hostel on the way down there. I mean, but FYI, hostels were 95% of where I stayed. Like, a lot of the artists I became friends with that had put me up, but 95% of that challenge was hostels, and the average London hostel's around nine-ish quid a night.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
So that was how I survived in hostels.
I'm getting visions of, like, all sorts of, like, being paid in, like, tacos almost, or penny bubbly sweets, or it was a real mixture of, I guess, of money or food or clothes, anything. Is that the reality of what it was?
Absolutely right. And it's really the thing I learned about that challenge is that it forces you in the best possible way to appreciate the smallest gestures. Like, if your mate buys you a burger, you'll probably just not even think about it. But when you're skint and you have no resources and someone offers to buy you a burger, either as payment or as well as financial payment, there's nothing better. And the whole challenge was never about finances. So if somebody said CK, like, whenever I think back on that challenge, there's one artist I remember I think of so fondly because I love her to death. And she said, CK, like, she tweeted me, she heard about the project. She tweeted me. She's called Sonia Bernardo. Go look her up, people. She tweeted me and said, "Oh, I'm skint, by the way, CK. I don't want to like take advantage. I'm skint. I don't know if you're still happy to do the shoot." And I said, "Yeah, of course I am. This isn't about money. This is just about like an adventure. So of course I'll photograph you." So we did the photographs, did the shoot, and we got on that well. Said, "CK, I can't let you go with nothing. Let me buy you something to eat. Let me buy you a burger, a drink, and some chips." Because she was skint, but she did that, and like it's those kind of gestures that just amplify.
Yeah,
that
sure.
that you take for granted in normal circumstances. So,
did you see, like, a bit of maybe an odd question, but did you see a real, like, because obviously there might be a stereotypical image that some people have got when you think unsigned musicians, you know, you might, did you see like a real dark side to the situation and the people that you met, you know, a real sense of like I don't want to use the word poverty, but you know, like unemployment and people really struggling? And did you see like a real dark side to what you saw down there, or was it polar opposite to that, like everybody having a great time and just trying to find a way to make the big time almost?
you use two very astute words there. You said poverty and struggle. I'll take each one in turn. Poverty, no. Like, no, not textbook poverty, but nor did I see riches either. In terms of the unsigned artists, certainly not, because actually most of them, if not all of them, have day jobs.
Okay, right, yeah.
So poverty in its strictest sense, no. I mean, some of them have like it was such an eye opener because some of them have like really like textbook professional jobs as well, if that makes sense. Like some of them work in law, some of them work in PR, blah blah. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
Some of them have their own business, if you like, but like I can 100% relate to that part of you as an artist that has to express. So this comes on to the second word that you used, which was struggle. So in terms of struggle, I wouldn't use the term struggle in terms of financial. I'd use it more the classic artistic struggle when you've got this thing in you that you want to share with the world. And you just keep on chiseling away at that. And that in itself is a struggle. So I saw that, I relate to it, and I share it as an artist myself.
Yeah, I guess it's that whole, you know, you kind of, I don't know, everybody, when you look at artists coming through, you kind of think of, I don't know, Britain's Got Talent or the X Factor experience. You see people busking on street corners and, you know, all that kind of stuff to try and just get noticed. And it's almost like, to a certain extent, there's a lot of people trying to chase that dream. But underneath all of that, you know, you've got people with a genuine love for whether it's art, whether it's music, and it's like I said to you when we first started chatting, is that sometimes the nice things, the passion that people have is not necessarily what pays the bills. And it's just a very, you know, sometimes that takes a big brave move for people that can do, you know, just suddenly leave the day job, for example, and do something that they believe in and they're passionate about, because often the financial and the commercial side prevents people from doing that. But I just think, you know, what you did, the experiences that you went through, the feedback that you got is just immense. It's just incredible. And that for me underpins everything. Like when we talk about CK, the PR consultant that get brands noticed and, you know, newspapers, TV, blah, 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 that experience in terms of the 100 musicians just kind of epitomizes everything that you are about and the way that you approach things and adopt things. I just think that, you know, taking into consideration, like John Covey, the chat with John I had last week, we were talking a little bit about people's pasts and how does people's past drive people on to do something. And I think what you've got there in that, you know, that wanting to get people noticed, every project that you do, whether it's 61 Uggs, whether it's the 100 musicians, whatever it is, you can feel that style and you can feel that desire. And I talk about having fire in your belly from a sales perspective, but you can absolutely feel that that energy and that passion in everything that you do come through. And I genuinely believe that that is what makes you good at the commercial side as well. You know, the day job, the trying to get brands promoted and products promoted. Would you agree it all kind of fits hand in hand?
You're frighteningly astute, David. I think I'm gonna take you on my book tour with me.
You can't put me in your pocket, mate. I'm a little bit too big for that, but I'm happy to accompany you. That's for sure.
I don't even feel I need to say any more. You've just summed it up so eloquently just there. And 100 Musicians was the genesis of every subsequent project, without question. That opened my, to use your term, that just really put the fire in my belly. And that just came out of a place of just boredom, and I just wanted to do something. And it just awoke me to the joys of just putting yourself out there and just being at the mercy of chance. Yeah. Being at the mercy of chance in the universe and just going with a loose idea and seeing what happens. And that's all the bench was. I'm sure we'll come on to the bench. But
yeah, I mean, you know,
I deliberately write, and I use the word write in inverted commas, I deliberately write chance into everything I do. Like, it's the loosest idea, and then I want the universe to be the biggest cast member, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I work with 100 Musicians. The biggest cast member wasn't me, it was the universe, because the universe had to bring me 61 people in that film, right? Did I just say 61 or 100? I meant 61.
Yeah.
So I deliberately, I don't want to sound too tree huggery, but I deliberately write chance into everything I do, because I just, it's what I find more fulfilling as a final product, when the universe just contributes to people.
Yeah, no, it's like I say, I've been a big fan of your stuff, and I guess, I do what is, again, I watch a lot of Netflix. I see a lot of stuff on there, and something, I watched an interview of yours yesterday with a guy. Forgive me, I can't remember his name, but he was a photographer, I think, and it's quite interesting. You say quite astute. I'm very good at kind of see, like you say, seeing things and understanding and getting the meaning behind it. And absolutely, when some people kind of watch this back, that was my genuine thoughts. We've not talked about that, off air. We've not had that conversation before. That's just me saying to you what I see when I look at 100 Musicians, 61 Hugs, and etc. So, but I do think it's amazing how that passion and that fire kind of shows through. Something I just want to talk about. We'll come back on to kind of the bench and 61 Hugs. I am conscious that, when people start to, hopefully, and I said this in my chat with John, I've got no expectation other than no expectation. That's how it is. I'm conscious that certain people will get certain takeaways from this. Some people will be interested in CK, the filmmaker, the documentary maker. Some people will be interested in CK, the PR expert. So what I think I'd like to kind of go on to now is moving into that PR side, and kind of just chat to you a little bit like that, really. So do you want to, tell us a little bit about that commercial side, as I call it? What kind of work have you got involved in? What challenges have you faced? And again, over to you to tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, the variety of my clients, past and present, is what I enjoy the most. So it ranges from, for argument's sake, on one side of the scale, you've got an independent yoga teacher. And this is very much in the forefront of my mind at the moment, because I use this in my book, which I'm going to be releasing next year. But it's all about how can you, in all honesty, Dave, the book is targeted at creatives and independent artists like me. How can you get your work featured in national publications, influential websites, etc.? Because I'm an artist, so it's just in my heart, right?
When you're hoping for the book to come out, CK, what's the plan in terms of when's?
September 2021 is what I'm aiming for.
Okay.
But the lessons that can be gleaned from the book are 100% transferable in business, because to be honest with you, most of them I learned through promoting brands anyway. There's a huge synergy between promoting an artist and promoting a brand. In fact, I would say they're almost identical. For me, it always starts with a story. And I use an analogy all the time. I use an analogy, and I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to give you the whole story now. It's going to take me forever to explain. But often what I find the biggest mistake brands do when they're approaching mainstream media is they often lead with their product and or service. So they'll just try and ram their product or service down the neck of a journalist. And the journalist is like, what the hell is this? You're speaking to the wrong person. You need to speak to the head of sales, right?
Yeah.
If you want to get your product and or service in mainstream press and you try and ram that into their throat, I guarantee you they'll reply with a rate card. And they'll tell you
for the advertising. Yeah.
this is how much it's going to charge you to advertise with us.
Yeah.
Right. And I was acutely aware of that very quickly. So then what I realized was if you're going to approach a journalist, don't go to them with the product or service, go to them with a highly seductive, relevant, timely story.
Yeah.
That's all journalists are interested in. A relevant, timely, ideally memorable, entertaining, or inspiring story.
Yeah.
Right. That's all they're interested in. Exclusively. So what you'll actually find is you need to bury your product and service. You need to talk about that right in the end of the footnotes. You need to talk about it, but right at the end of the footnotes. So you need to go with them. You need to go to them with a seductive story. Now, one of my favorite examples of this is when I was working with a yoga teacher in 2018. I didn't know him, but one of my friends introduced us and he said, CK, Matt's about to launch his men-only yoga class. It's a yoga class, as the name suggests, for men only, and he needs some help in generating awareness for it. So I met up with Matt and we had a chat, and his story was really interesting because he used to work for HSBC in their IT department until he was made redundant.
Okay.
And Matt, he won't mind me saying it's like Matt doesn't class himself as a traditional blokey bloke. So all the traditional blokey bloke things have never been a source of stress relief for him, i.e. football, like all the major sports have never done it for him. So he's always been more into the serene stuff like yoga and etc. So yeah. Matt telling me all this, and I saw the story immediately because what he said to me is like all the traditional manly stuff like football was never really good for my mental health. Like I'm very sensitive to my mental health and I want to have like a peace of mind, and football and that stuff never did that. So yoga just brought me instant calmness and serenity. So when Matt's telling me all this stuff, instantly I'm looking for the story, and I saw it very quickly. Because as you know, right now, nothing is more prevalent in mainstream media than mental health.
Yeah,
right?
Mindfulness, mental health, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Matt's telling me all this, and immediately I could see the story coming together, because not only is he creating a men-only yoga class, which in of itself is a unique hook, right? And I talk about hooks all the time, but it's quite unique to be talking about a men-only yoga class. Then when you combine that with the fact that Matt doesn't consider himself a very traditional blokey bloke, you know, he's more into the serenity and peace of mind that he gets through yoga, I just saw the story start falling into my lap. So combine that, and this is the final point, combine that with the fact that he was made redundant from HSBC. Everyone can relate to redundancy.
Yeah.
Whether you've been made redundant or you know someone who has, you can relate to that, right? And that feeds into one of my main 3 pillars of any good story. And I'm going to wrap it up now because I can talk forever about this. But my main 3 pillars of a seductive, memorable, newsworthy story is a story that contains either vulnerability, optimism, or resilience. If you've not got any one of those 3 pillars in your story, then you've got...
Knackered.
Pardon?
You're knackered, yeah.
Let's go with knackered. Let's go with knackered. I was going to say your chances are dramatically reduced, but I prefer knackered. So vulnerability, optimism, or resilience. And once he started talking to me about the fact he used to work for HSBC and he was made redundant, that feeds into the vulnerability in terms of financial and personal security, right? So I knew that much of the story was going to be related around that and the mental health. The actual fact he was launching a class, I barely even referenced, because that's when they're going to start trying to sell me advertising space. Yes. So I frame, so basically, in a nutshell, what I do for my clients is I frame their story in a way that is conducive to a journalist's requirements. All right. Okay. I frame it in a way that is a news story that kind of ends with what we're selling. So at the end, you've always got that footnote. Matt, it was called Yoga Treat. So Matt's Yoga Collective, Men's Yoga Collective, is at X on X day at X time. Get tickets here. That's the last thing that I talk about. So that's a very succinct example of what I do for clients. I frame their story in a way that's going to get them featured.
Would you say that, like, you know, like the films and stuff that you do, they've got a particular style to them. It's CK style, call it whatever you like. Would you say that the way that you deal with people's product, brand, event, whatever, do you have a style for that also? And does that kind of match, would you say, the film stuff, or is everything that you do so sporadic and random that it doesn't really matter what kind of artist or what kind of product they are, let's be honest, trying to sell or get out there or promote?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
That's an exceptional question, and one I've never necessarily considered before, but I really like it. And the reason I really like it is, you're right, there is a commonality that wafts through them both. It's subtle, but it's there all the same, and that is my awareness and interest in humans, right? So I'm like fascinated by humans, and I think I've got a higher than average emotional intelligence. I'm very good at reading people very quickly, and I'm very good at understanding how to get an idea into someone's head very quickly. So when it comes to promoting a product, if I use one of my clients from, I think it was a year ago, called Holy Moly Cookies, it's a new healthy cookie brand in Sheffield. And they wanted to elevate their profile because they had just recently got into Selfridges. So they were being sold in Selfridges. But I knew I couldn't lead with that because, again, selling. So after the consultation with them and finding out what the whole backstory was, there was some fun, cute little stories that they told me. And the main one was they were accountants, very young couple. They were accountants. Every time they used to work in the accountancy, the snack trolley would roll in at lunchtime, and it would just be full of sugar-fueled garbage, right? You have a snack, and then your energy plummets within an hour, right? So then they just started making flapjacks at home, brought them into the office. People loved them. It sounds a little bit cliche, but it's true. Anyway, they also told me that while they were testing their better products, you know, the first stage of their cookies, when they were testing them at markets, they didn't have the recipe nailed. So they were trying to make cookies that were just falling apart in the packet because they weren't binding properly, right?
Okay.
A bit of a geeky observation. If you take fat out of something to make it healthy, you undermine its ability to hold itself together because fat binds stuff. Yeah. So because they took the fat out, it was just falling apart in the packet. So they were going to sell it, and it was basically like popcorn. They were trying to sell popcorn because it was just crumbs.
Yeah.
So they're telling me this. Now, let's just go back to my 3 pillars: vulnerability, optimism, resilience. Now, what of those 3 do you think that little analogy speaks to about not getting the recipe right? Vulnerability, optimism.
The vulnerability side. No?
And, and a little bit of resilience, right? Because you keep on perfecting the recipe, trying to figure it out, right? Yeah. And to be fair, there's even optimism in there because, like, they've got to have some degree of optimism. It's going to work, or they'll just pack it in and go back to accountancy.
Yeah.
So these guys had all 3, so I knew I could go with that. So basically what I led with them was the kind of David and Goliath story. Like, we're trying to figure out this recipe, but we can't. We were trying to sell it. We were selling it at markets. It wasn't working. And I just knew that people would relate to that because we all have our struggles. We all trying to figure something out, right? We all want the small ascending brand to do well at the end of the day. And I just recognize that people relate to that element before they relate to someone getting featured, someone getting a shelf on Selfridges. Who cares? Right.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think if I look back at, it's like there's a lot of brands out there, and I'll go with a brand, like, particularly at the moment, that brand that, I guess what I'm trying to say is the startup, the sustainability, the brand that's got a story to tell. Like, take for example, and I go back to when the you know, even the kids even eat them now, but there's a product out there called Ella's Kitchen, right? Now, Ella's Kitchen is a food for babies, children. It grows in stages, so, you know, birth 1 to 2, blah, blah. And basically, it's pureed food. I don't know if you've seen it, CK, but it's in the supermarket, it's pureed food. Now, the fact is that there's a great story behind that. Now, nobody probably really gives a shit whether Ella's real or not. You know, the reality is, hopefully, I'd like to think that Ella is real and it's a true story. But the point is that there's a story behind it. You know, it was a farm-based produce, natural products, sustainable products. They were trying to find food to feed, you know, Ella. They pureed up the food. They come out with a gazillion different flavors and then they put it into these like really neat little packets. Now that story has got a really kind of, like I say, sustainable story and a believable story. Everybody loves a story, right? And that's kind of what you're saying, where, you know, a good way to kind of get a product out there is ultimately you tell a really nice story, you give people that nice story, whatever the product is, the story will sell the product. You don't have to make it so obvious, because the story builds up the picture, and then the people decide to look behind the story and understand what the product is, right?
This is music. This is music to my ears.
And I think that's amazing, and you can deadly see that's the style. And then again, the other thing that springs to my mind, following on from that, is, do you ever work with brands, companies, people? And again, I guess it builds back into, and this is totally unscripted, I haven't got anything down on paper about this at all. This is what then I start to think of is, do you or can you work with things that you don't believe in, right? Because I know you as a person, and I go, morally, ethically, you know, so I look back and I look at some of the stuff, and I didn't know about the cookie thing. But I look back at some of the artists that you've helped. Forgive me, I forget his surname, but Jamie, the artist, the guy who does the portraits. I look at all the stuff that you've done around the filmmaking. You actually, and again, this is me probably being a bit too observant, but you probably don't want to work with people that you don't believe in. You know, I can't see you. I know you do work with a couple of different solicitors, but I think that's right, is it? A couple of solicitors, but they're probably brands and solicitors that do a particular kind of work and stuff that you believe in. I'm probably right in thinking that you probably wouldn't want to promote or believe in something that doesn't have the right kind of story behind it, right? Is that?
That's another great question, and one that's been at the top of my mind recently. It's connected to this, but a little bit of a tangent as well. I was recently approached by, are you familiar with CBD products?
No.
Like,
no.
CBD is like, it's an extract from cannabis, which has
yeah.
So I was approached by one recently wanting to sponsor my podcast, actually.
Like oils, are they like oils and CBD oils? I know they're doing some great things with CBD in like the medical world, you know, to treat, for example, certain cancers or like fibromyalgia, you know, like stressy kind of illnesses and all that kind of stuff. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Exactly right. There's numerous ways in which you can ingest it. So they are the capsules. There's also patches.
Yeah.
There's oils. So yeah, I wanted to sponsor the show, and actually, in principle, I didn't know anything about them. So like most people, it's like, yeah, give me the money, but I wanted to research it, find out what it's about, use it myself. I didn't notice any immediate difference, but that's not to say they don't work. Maybe they just didn't work for me, or maybe I didn't use enough. I only used it once. Maybe I should have carried on using it. Anyway, to answer your question directly, I think it's a great question. I've never worked with anybody I didn't believe in, but I've worked with people that I didn't, how can I put it? I didn't feel the kind of, all right, so you mentioned Jamie, the artist. That's my idea of a dream client, right? Yeah. But sometimes the kind of product and or service you don't use, or you have little knowledge of, so you have to go and research it, figure it out. And you might love the human behind it, but you might not know a great deal about the product, but getting it seen is the same anyway. It doesn't make a difference. In terms of when I work with someone that I didn't believe in, it depends on what the product was. It really does. Like if it's something that I have concerns about from a health and user point of view, then definitely not.
No, but absolutely. You don't strike me as a sort of guy that's going to promote or work with anything that doesn't match your vision or ethical, moral beliefs. Call it, you know, dress it up how you like. You're not going to sell yourself out to work with somebody for money if you don't believe in the idea yourself. And I know that because I can see you're that type of person.
Well, to be fair, Dave, in the interest of full disclosure for everybody listening to this, that situation hasn't yet happened. So I don't want to give the impression I've just been batting away thousands of pounds because it's just not happened. That hasn't happened yet. So maybe we should pick this up in maybe a couple of years and we'll see
what's happened. So obviously, you know, part of the talk was going to be around how you help, you know, promote brands, products, and get them noticed. And again, I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but there might be people listening thinking, look, I've got a product, I've got an idea, I've got a passion. I really need some kind of hints, tips, takeaways of how to kind of work with that. I guess the first one I'd say is immediately pick up the phone, drop CK a tweet, a message, whatever, on one of his, you know, abundance of different channels, because you have got like a gazillion different channels.
Not true.
Yeah, but it feels like it. CK is everywhere, you know, obviously, you know, that would be the thing. But is there anything that's, you know, without giving kind of too much away, because obviously, you know, I'd never ask anybody to, you know, publicly kind of promote the secrets of how they do things. But if I'm sat here and I'm thinking, I've got this product, I've got this service, I've got this passion, but I really don't know how to kind of get it off the ground, or what advice would you give to somebody like that?
That's such a good, I'll tell you the difficulty with answering that question, and it's got nothing to do with not wanting to give everything away, because I love giving information away, so I'll happily. I've already given away my main 3 things that I want everybody to be cognizant of moving forward. Vulnerability, optimism, resilience, and then someone story. Forget your products, nobody cares, unless you want to pay for advertising. Forget it. But what I've noticed with alarming frequency, Dave, is that whenever I'm having an initial consultation with a client, which is when I'm doing the fact finding, in almost 95.8% of the time, they're not actually aware of the hook that they're sitting on, because it's often like a personal thing that's personal to them. So they'll just be telling me loads of things. They'll just skip over a real gem and they'll just carry on talking. I'll be like, whoa, let's come back a minute. Let's talk about that bit. What I'm basically saying is, Dave, is that almost nobody knows what their story is in terms of what's the most fascinating, memorable, timely part of your backstory. No one ever really knows what that is, and I totally understand why that is, because not everybody's head's screwed on from a PR point of view, like mine per se. So very few people recognize that they're sitting on something that's potentially powerful that can be leveraged to develop traction for their business, brand, or service or product. Very few people know what it is, and that's fine. Why should they? I've had to figure it out for years. So what I would probably say is, and this is an analogy that I use, this is an analogy that I mentioned in the book, actually, and I always say this. I want you to imagine 2 strangers sitting in a pub, Josie and Ryan, right?
Imagine, I'm interested. Josie and Ryan, are they people that you know? Or do you always use Josie and Ryan, or is Josie and Ryan just came up in your head then?
Do you want the honest answer?
Yes, please.
Some students recently moved into the house next door. And
Josie and Ryan?
One of them's a girl, and I met her for the first time the other day. We started talking, exchanged names. She called Josie. I thought, oh, what a nice name. So I put her in the book. Anyway, so I don't know where Ryan came from. One of my best mates at school was called Ryan. Anyway, so imagine Josie and Ryan sitting in a pub.
Yeah.
I always say to people, when you're trying to figure out your story, or you're wanting to create, like, as we discussed yesterday, Dave, like a guerrilla marketing stunt, a big ornate stunt that's going to get attention or eyeballs on you. Whenever you're kind of developing that, always say to yourself, right, Josie and Ryan are sitting in the pub, they're talking to each other about a product, a service, or a person, or a stunt, or whatever. Right? What one sentence, if Josie is telling Ryan about this thing she's just seen, but Ryan has never heard of it, but she's telling him, what one thing could Josie say to Ryan about your product or service or backstory that would make him think, oh, that's interesting? What could Josie say to Ryan that would stop Ryan from falling asleep? So if Josie said to Ryan, there's this new snack that's 15% less fat-filled than the average snack. Ryan's probably like, oh, all right, cool. Cheers. But, you know, if Josie starts telling him a story about these young founders who were just selling shitty food that was falling apart, it's kind of probably going to laugh. It's probably going to be, well, that's why they're selling that. So I always say to people, think about two people, 2 mates in a pub. One person knows about product, the other person doesn't. What can that person that does know about it say to the person that doesn't? It's going to actually make them care or make them be interested. Now, that could be a feature of the product, or it could actually be something about your personal backstory.
Yeah.
So what is in your background that would make you relatable, interesting, fascinating, or just generate curiosity in someone? And lead with that when it comes to sculpting your story. Lead with that, not the product stuff.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think, do you think sometimes people often make that up then? So if you don't have anything interesting or exciting, or is it like, do they just make shit up? You know?
I love that question so much. I'll tell you why I love that question. because I think there are ways to create an element of your story that is in principle made up, but it's a very welcomed way of doing it.
A creative way, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's really difficult for people to understand what I'm talking about if I don't give you context. But I'll try and wrap this up in a 2-minute example. There was one woman that came to me that makes really elaborate, ornate scarves. Right. Kind of high-priced, high-quality scarves. And she came to me, and actually someone connected us. Anyway, long story short, she was obsessed with will.i.am. She's so obsessed with will.i.am that she even went down to a Manchester audition of The Voice when they're auditioning for contestants just to meet him. She battled her way through all the crowds, got through the producer, said to the producer, I've got to be in that audition room. Not to audition, just to be in the audience of watching, right?
Just to see him, yeah.
In the audience watching. She was like, please let me through. They let her through. I loved her. She even said, I've got this scarf I've made specifically for Will. I want to give it to Will. So the producers kind of really liked her because she's very effervescent, she's a great character. They let her into the audience. She was sat there, Will, making a massive fuss. Anyway, she got his attention. He invited her onto the stage before they were filming. He said, I've got this thing for you. He went, what is it? It's a scarf I've made for you. And he kind of, oh, that's really nice. She's like, will you tweet it? She's not bothered. She's like, she'll ask anything. Will you tweet about my scarf? And he's like, of course I will. Anyway, long story short, he never tweeted about the scarf, but she had that great little story, that little great encounter. So she came to me with a story fully formed, right? But in my head, it wasn't yet fully formed. It wasn't perfect yet. I could go to the press with that story, but it was missing something. So what I said to her is, let's see if there's any kind of will.i.am lookalikes. Let's kind of do a photo shoot with a will.i.am lookalike, get him wrapped up in your stuff, kind of just so we've got the visual assets to support the story as well. And I did some research. There was one like main UK will.i.am lookalike in the UK. I reached out to him and said, would you be open to doing like a little meet, taking some shots? Anyway, he said, yeah, of course, why not? And he's been on TV and stuff. So we did that little shoot with him. Then I basically went to the press with the story of how like this, we reached out to this guy. We did a little photo shoot because she wants to get in the perfect fitted scarf. Yeah. So that's why we wanted to get the perfect, the kind of fitting and stuff. So then we led with that news story, and that got BBC coverage, print, web. So that's kind of taking a story and then just elaborating and adding a little bit of special magic.
Being creative with it, I think that's the key thing. And that kind of, I guess, brings me on to my next thought, which is around like budget and money. And I think one of the things, having spent a lot of time with you and seeing the work that you do, there's a bit of a misconception, and we were talking about this yesterday, but a bit of a misconception around you've got to spend a load of money in order to get noticed, in order to get seen. And that really is, I'll use the word nonsense, because we talked about yesterday, plenty of brands out there that are doing great things, not really spending anything on anything. And I guess apart from, your time, that's one of the advantages on the kind of stuff that you do, because you are that person that goes, look, you don't have to spend, like you just said, the minute you start talking about a product, then it's going to be show us your rate card and you're going to have to spend some money. One of the brilliant things about you and the work that you do, taking that brand and that passion, is you don't actually need to do that, right? I'm sure there are instances where you do. You're going to need stuff that's going to need paying for, but that's kind of your specialism, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's entirely client and project dependent. Yeah. So I've made a 3-part ad campaign for a gift card supplier. It was a Christmas campaign.
Was that the South Yorkshire shopping thing?
That was a gift card.
Yeah, with Shane. Was Shane involved in that? Yeah.
So Shane is a mutual friend for anyone thinking who's Shane.
Yeah.
Is that Joseph's housemate?
Yeah.
So in that instance, Sheffield Gift Card came to me after they'd just seen 61 Homes, my short film. They'd seen that. They loved it. He said, can you do anything like that for us?
Yeah.
So
The thing is, right, Shane's definitely going to have to share this now because we've plugged him in this session. So if I'll make a note of the time, I don't know, like an hour in, I'm going to say, Shane, you've got to now watch this video because kind of round about just after an hour, you're mentioned. So he's definitely going to watch this now till the end. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I hope he does. I love Shane.
Yeah.
But I've known him since I was a kid. But that was the first time that a brand commission was a direct result of a personal project.
Yeah.
Because people say, like, why do you do the personal projects? They don't earn you any money. And they're right. They don't. But that was the first time that someone saw one of my personal projects and said, here's some money, do some CK for us. So in that instance, like I created, I wrote, I filmed them a 3-part ad campaign for Christmas, which gave them their best ever Christmas revenues. Conversely, if we go back to Matt, who was the yoga teacher, all I did for Matt in that instance, because there's 3 different levels of service that I offer for clients. There's writing the press release, and a press release is basically like a well-formatted announcement about what you're wanting to talk about and sending that to the press. So in that instance, Matt commissioned me just to write his press release, and he did all the distribution and pitching to the media on his own. But on the back of just one commission, which at the time was about 290 quid just to write a press release, on the back of that, he got the front cover of the Barnsley Chronicle and he sold out his first ever yoga class. So you've gone from 300 quid to, I think it was just about 2 grand for the ad campaign or something. So you've got those and everything in between. Yeah. So but underpinning both of those is an understanding of story and an understanding of how to get into people's heads in a memorable, unique way. And Jamie was another example of that as well. Jamie's a perfect example.
It appears to me, and again, I'm not trying to give anybody the wrong impression here, but it appears to me that when people work with you, you totally devote yourself, for want of a better phrase, and immerse yourself in that brand, in that product, in that person. And actually, in terms of the commercials, the final, because me and you are very different. I'm sales. I'm all about getting the sale and commercial. Whereas we said yesterday, 95% creative, 5% commercial. It seems to me that anybody that does have the pleasure of working with you, they get a lot more than what those commercials ever bring. You totally immerse yourself into that idea and that process. So it's like, cut all the emotion to one side. Anybody that does work with you is just getting such good value for money because you actually take it on almost like your own. Would you agree?
Well, to a point, the thing that I am more obsessive about than anything, Dave, and this comes back to my earlier point. Remember, at school, I wasn't a sporty kid. I wasn't the highly academic kid, and I wasn't the kid all the girls are talking about. However, I had the imagination going for me. Yeah. Right? So that is, I spend so much time in my own head. Like ideas and imagination and concepts just fascinate me. I love them. I get lost in them. Right.
Yeah.
So one thing that a brand or an entrepreneur or an artist will always get from me is they're always going to get an idea that's going to make them think, what the fuck? Like, where did that come from? They're always going to get that. It'll just be part of it. And often I've learned that it's those what the fuck ideas that for the most part are what gets attention on stuff.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. And I think now, what I would say, and I've always made no secret about why I'm doing these conversations, these chats. It's for me, my own personal development. I'm very much a people person. Love to give things back, that gift to give, pay it forward, call it whatever you like, which kind of fits in perfectly with you. And what I would really say is that, I've seen the way that you work. I've seen the passion that you put into your work, and I've seen firsthand the results that you get. And it is a bit of a shameless plug, but a plug for you is that what I would say is that, look, if there's anybody out there that has got a product or a service or an idea, just basically get in touch with you, because I think they would be getting exceptional value for money. Somebody that particularly locally knows the area, knows the brands, knows where to take stuff. And before we kind of, I've got a few more things I wanted to say, but how would you say, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? What channel do you spend the most time on, and how do people get in touch with you, basically?
They're 2 different questions. I'll tell you why. the channel I spend most time on has nothing to do with how people can commission me for PR. Two different things entirely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of the promotion and publicity and generating awareness in the mainstream press, definitely go to the PR consultancy website for that, which is Icons and Machines. So the URL is iconsmachines.com, and all the services are laid out under the services. So it can be as accessible from a financial point of view as commissioning me to write your press release, or even editing and proofreading one you've written yourself.
Yeah.
Right down to the other end of the spectrum, which is the full campaign delivery for you as well. So all the services are on iconsmachines.com.
Yep. Perfect.
And me personally, I'm elsewhere.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And you know, to tie everything back together, I'm gonna just talk for a few minutes, basically bringing us back to the film stuff. Now, so we started with the film stuff. We then got into like the day job, the PR stuff, and you know, I said to you earlier, I did spend a bit of time going back over some stuff that you've done, and you know, for me, the bench is my favourite. You know, I said that to you earlier, and basically, and I think I probably told you this story before. Years and years and years ago, I remember being sat at home, and I was still living with my parents, so it's a fair few years ago now. And I remember sat there, and there was a program on called The Street, right? And it was set. There's a lot. If you go back and Google The Street, I'm pretty sure it was like in the 80s or something like that, late 80s. And basically, it was a street, and on this street, you've got different houses, different people with different challenges, different problems, you know. So you might have one street, and it's true now if you think about it, you don't know what's going off behind closed doors. You don't know the battles that people are facing, whether it's relationships, whether it's financial, whether it's illness, you know. And basically, this program, This Street, was a different house on a different day, looking at the problems that they were faced with. And, you know, one of the stories was, I remember it well, was there was a family there, man and wife. I'm pretty sure they got kids, but it's so long ago. And she was coping with a brain tumor. You know, she actually died. Another house was basically, you know, somebody was really up against it financially and ended up like killing themselves because, you know, because of the financial side. And when I saw your series, which I think it was either a 6 or an 8-parter, springs to mind. I'm not really sure.
Was the way just over the actual number? It was 7.
Yeah, 7. There you go. So we went 6, we went 8. It was 7. So 7-part series, and I likened it so much to that. So basically, you've got a bench somewhere in an undisclosed location within Sheffield at sometimes 9 o'clock at night, sometimes 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, however long it took. And basically, you sit down on this bench and people are walking past and you're asking them and you're inviting them to come and sit on this bench and chat. And it reminded me so much of not necessarily the street, but my experiences of the time the street was being filmed. So what it actually did cleverly, and this is just my own personal thing, this wouldn't happen for anybody else, is I connected your series with the street and then connected the street with the time being at home with my parents. Now my stepfather, unfortunately, he passed away in 2013. He had pancreatic cancer. And the point is that, and you wouldn't have ever known this, and this is how crazy this gets, is that what it did is it took me back to that time and it made me think about my experiences and my time as a family growing up. And that, for me, is my own personal reasons why. Now, that's just me. You know, that was not saying that the bench was my favourite because I thought it was the best thing that you've ever done. It's because I could relate it to an experience or a time in my life. You get me? So, but I think the bench was fantastic, and you know, you could probably elaborate a little bit more about what the bench was about, but. Or you might even say I've done a great job with it already, but you know, how did you find it? What kind of reaction did it get from people?
Yeah, mate. Well, thank you so much for sharing that personal story in terms of how it conjured up those memories, and I hope they were fond memories as well when you were thinking back.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, mate. I wasn't aware of that. And you were right in your description of it. Then maybe the one thing that you did miss is that every night when I went out and sat on that bench, late at night, dark, sometimes raining, every night I went out with a question. So I wasn't asking people to join me and talk about any random thing. I always had a question.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And as people walked past, I would ask them that question, and they would either stop and answer it. Then I'd say, would you like to join me and let's talk this out further? Or they'd just walk on past thinking I was a weirdo. So I can't even explain how fond I am of that, how fond, proud, happy, satisfied, fulfilled I am with that, for so many reasons, not all of them connected to the actual thing itself. From a personal reason, from a personal standpoint, I'm a massive overthinker, as you'll know if you've watched 60
Yes.
at home.
Yeah.
I'm plagued with overthinking and overanalyzing. And actually, both of those qualities do have their benefits as well, but if you take them too far, they can also be quite paralyzing. So
Yeah.
the way the idea for the bench came about is I was just out going for a late night walk, which I often do. And I walked past that bench, which, by the way, that I've been aware of that bench for many decades. It's been part of my childhood. Anyway, walked past it late at night. I thought, how come none of your kind of projects or documentaries or short films are ever filmed in the nighttime? They're always in the daytime. The only reason I was having that thought is because like a few days earlier, I'd released a spontaneous video which did really well on YouTube, and it was filmed in the day. Anyway, so I was thinking, you've never done anything in the night. I wonder if there's something you can do at night. I walked past that bench and I just thought, what if you just sat on a bench and just asked people to join you and chat? Now, the minute I had the idea, I knew there was something in it, and I knew it could work, especially if I asked them a certain question every single night. But the overthinker in me started thinking, oh, there's something in that idea. Go and sleep on it and come back and maybe do it in a few weeks. But I've learned over the years that sleep on it, maybe refine it, come back to in a couple of weeks. From an artistic point of view, often if you actually slip into that, you're kidding yourself. You think it's because you want to refine it, but you're actually looking for an excuse not to do it because you're scared, right?
Yeah.
And I've become acutely aware of that tendency in me. So the minute I had the idea and I thought, just sleep on it, then I thought, well, actually, what's there to sleep on? The idea is simple. It's pure.
Just go for it. Yeah, impulsively, just go for it. Yeah.
So what I'm saying, Dave, is that is the first, last, and the only project to date that I've ever had the idea and executed it immediately. So I just sat down and I did episode 1 that night. I've never done that before, and I've never done it since. So that's one of the reasons I'm super proud.
So the question on my mind is there going to be a series 2?
I may, honestly. Do you know what? This pandemic has scuppered so many things for me. I mean, there's an argument for doing it in the pandemic, actually.
That'd be really interesting. Yeah.
And I've not tried it, but I definitely think there's an argument for maybe giving it a go. But yeah, unquestionably, there's so much mileage for me in exploring the bench, either in Sheffield or another city or another country.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, completely different country. That'd be like a whole different load of barriers to kind of get over. So that'd be amazing. Well, listen, like I said, when we first started chatting, I'm a great admirer of the stuff that you do. I'd like to think, I've become a personal friend, and I genuinely look out for you and the stuff that you do, and I think it's amazing. And I genuinely think that, in terms of you, I know you've got this, I wouldn't say a bit of a goal, or maybe it is of a goal, but you once told me that, the dream, if you like, the bigger picture is you'd love to get something on in kind of mainstream in terms of like Netflix, for example. I would absolutely love that to happen. I think everything that you do deserves that success and that dream. And, me knowing you, I don't think you're ever going to actually stop until you actually get there. And I just genuinely, for the future, wish you all the success with that, because you absolutely do deserve it. And, I think dreams are there to be had. And I genuinely hope that happens. I genuinely do. For me,
honestly, I genuinely find that a conversation with you, I always come out of it just feeling like I'm walking on the cloud. You're a very generous man. I always appreciate everything you say. Thank you.
And I mean it, and it's really, it comes from here. I'm really sincere, and I think the one, like, you've got your signature, as I call it, and one of your signatures is when you're doing documentaries, you'll lean over and you'll get the person to do the film, and you'll stop it, on the phone, like The Bench, for example. Now I'm not going to do that because that's not my signature. But one of the things that I love to ask everybody is, it's no secret that my motto is around that, be brilliant, and for me, my version of being brilliant, people get this thing, it's like, it's got to be something really grand, like a massive thing, like something of real significance and importance. And that's not actually the case. Being brilliant for me can just be something as simple as just trying your best, or for example, going up and buying the guy that's really struggling, or is like, homeless person, buying him a coffee or whatever. It could be just something so insignificant that it doesn't have to be that big thing. Like, what's your and my signature is talking to people around, what do you think being brilliant means to you? So, and again, I'm putting you on the spot, but what's your be brilliant thing? What would you say if I said to you, what does be brilliant mean to you, CK?
I do have an answer for that, and for me, and it echoes what you've just said. It doesn't have to be like a grand statement or a grand action.
Yeah.
For me, being brilliant is actually just leaning into that thing that you love the most. And the reason I say that is because I am acutely aware, for many reasons, all of them valid to a point. I'm very aware of the majority of people have something that they love, or have something that fills their heart with glee, but for whatever reason, and it's theirs to have, for whatever reason, they don't necessarily pursue it. And by pursuing it, I don't mean throwing away the day job and making a big announcement, right, this thing is me. It doesn't have to be that. It can just be just doing it. And like, no one even has to know.
Yeah.
No one even has to know. But what I'm saying is that a lot of people don't do it for fear of trying or for fear of being ridiculed. And all of those things have merit. I get them all. We all have our own psychological baggage. My God, I have shitloads of it. Loads of it. But for me, being brilliant is at the very least just leaning into it and giving it a go.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly believe that everybody is above average at least one thing, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's above average at least one thing. And I think a lot of people aren't necessarily exploring whatever that thing is. And I just say, just exploring that in of itself is brilliant, purely because not everybody does.
Yeah. So just kind of dig deep inside and just kind of go for it, and just forget about all the reasons why you wouldn't want to do it, or all the reasons why it might not work, or just really go for it.
And I can't stress enough. I don't want anybody leaving this saying, like, it's not, as you said, it's not about big, bold decisions and announcements. Right, that's it, I'm doing that. It's like, it can be the smallest thing. It can be the smallest thing, and just giving that a go. Whatever you've wanted to give a go, however small it is, and for whatever reason you haven't, just give that a go. For me, that is good. Because not everybody necessarily does.
No, that's great. Listen, mate, once again, it's been an absolute honour and a pleasure, and I do genuinely wish you well in everything that comes your way, or anything you decide to do. And just once again, thank you, really. So that's it. That's the second episode done. We now kind of work on the rest, and we'll see where this journey takes us. But CK, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, mate. I've really enjoyed this. Take care.